Just got up, something's wrong. I waited up with wounds on my feet. Where will you be? Flickering through memories, the Polaroids yellowed in the sun, longing to be seen. So come and hide, hide with me, hide with me, hide with me.
Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'm reviewing the BMW 320d xDrive. Now this is an LCI model, or a facelift model. It's 2017. For my regular viewers, you'll know that this car is a bit like a long-term test car. Tony Lewis from BMW lent me this car for just over 2 months, and in fact it goes back this afternoon. I've done about 1,500 miles in the time I've had my hands on it, and they've been varied miles from down to the shop, to the gym, long sort of motorway jaunts, a bit of back road blasting, everything really. I've really used this car as my daily stroke everything car, and I've really enjoyed it actually. I've enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would have done. I have read many mixed reviews about the xDrive platform in particular, and I wasn't sure that I'd be that blown away by it. Now, we all know the 320d, the rear wheel drive version, is a very good car, and in fact Chris Harris did a very good video on that, so I'll let you guys watch that, and I'll put a link to that underneath in the description, where he basically goes on to say, you know, do you need any more car than a 320d? Now, I know there's a lot of diesel haters out there, and there's also a lot of people that I had sort of read about or listened to complaining about the suspension setup of the xDrive cars. Now, with the 3 Series, in xDrive guys, the car actually sits up, I'm not sure how much further, but it certainly looks like about 1.5 inches higher. So obviously that means the center of gravity is a fair amount higher. It's, you know, it's the worst thing you can do to a car in terms of handling, and that's what they've done in order to give the car some more xDrive capabilities, i.e. you can take this car off-road to a certain extent. And in fact, if you put some proper sort of all-weather or winter tyres on this car, I reckon it would be quite a off-road weapon. It's got, you know, it's got enough clearance, it's got quite a sophisticated xDrive all-wheel drive setup, so yeah, it would be good. I'd love to try this car in, say, the snow with some proper winter or snow tyres on it. But the months that I've had, it's been reasonably dry, reasonably warm months, and yeah, I've kind of experienced most of the time behind the wheel in that sort of climate and weather. I have had it out in some really wet, slippery days, where I've discovered that actually the xDrive setup that I thought was very 50-50 bias is actually more rear bias, which is great news for all of us. It just means the car, you know, it's very balanced, and it feels very much like you'd expect a BMW to feel, which is great. That was one of my main concerns before getting in this car. I've driven a couple of other xDrive cars, but I've never really pushed them. xDrive BMW, sort of base model ones, never really pushed them, but they've always felt very neutral, maybe a little front bias, typically 4-wheel drive, bit of understeer, whereas, you know, you jump in a BMW and you want a bit of oversteer, and this one, especially in the wet, will give you oversteer if you pitch it into a corner right. So I've been told anyway. Let's talk about the engine. So we've got a 2-litre turbo diesel 4-pot under the hood. Now, it's a fairly noisy lump. On the move, it's fine, absolutely fine. In fact, as you can tell now, you probably can't hear any engine sound at all. That's drowned out by the 19-inch tyre roar and any kind of wind noise. So it's not the loudest engine in the world once you're moving, but around town when you're doing slow speed stuff, especially if you've got your windows open, you can hear that sort of rattly 4-pot. But you kind of get used to it, and that's kind of what you expect out of any 4-pot diesel these days. And for some reason, manufacturers just can't seem to get them particularly quiet. They can't seem to quieten them down. I'm sure that's got a lot to do with the way that the engine fires and the way that a turbo diesel engine works. And I'm not very technical in that respect, so I couldn't explain it. But when or if you get behind the wheel of a 330D, which has got the 6-pot under the hood, it's so much more refined. I mean, you know, 3-4 times more refined, more quiet, and makes a very nice, almost sort of subdued V8 sound. And the 330D really is a more powerful, more premium car, and it goes a lot faster. It's, in my opinion, just as efficient. You know, you have to work the engine less to get the same performance as, say, this one when you're really sort of ragging it. So it's a fantastic car, the 330D, but it's a fair amount more expensive than this, and especially as this is currently on a very good deal. I think this particular car with this very sort of highly spec'd options it retails at about 39.5, and I know Tony's doing it for just over 30 at the moment, which works out at about £345 a month with £1,000 deposit. So they're exceptional value, really are good value, and a 330D is going to cost you a chunk more than that. So we talked about the engine a bit. It's a bit noisy. It's a typical diesel, but it produces 190 horsepower, which is incredible for a 2-litre diesel, and it produces about 300 pound-feet of torque, which is the figure you want from a diesel. You know, that gives it the sort of mid-range punch, and it just makes the car feel very effortless. Now this has a 0 to 60 time of 7.4 seconds. That's quick. You know, go back sort of 10-15 years, that was like sports cars quick, and it doesn't feel that quick from behind the wheel, but we all know that BMW figures are very conservative, so that's going to be a realistic figure. It has a top speed of about 147 miles an hour, I believe, which again, I believe Chris Harris finds and discovers that is a very true top speed in the basic 320D that he had. Now, but you don't buy this car for performance, but at least you know the figures are there if you need it. You buy it really, I mean, this is an all-round package, you know, it really is, but what you do buy it for is MPG. Now, like I said, I've done about 1,500 miles in this car, and I've had the odometer reset from day one when it had 2 miles on the clock. So I've got a realistic reading of the actual MPG that this car has done in the 2 and a bit months I've had it. Now I've averaged 41.6 MPG on a combined cycle. So that's, yeah, me going back and forth to the gym 10 times, me doing long journeys, me doing spirited country drives, me filming, you know, that's a realistic average MPG. And I think for just over 41 MPG for sort of a mid-sized family saloon that does 0 to 60 in just over 7 seconds is an exceptionally good realistic figure. This is a realistic figure. On top of that, I've achieved well over 50 MPG on many long runs. In fact, I think my record was 58 MPG, which is just exceptional. And that leads me on to how you drive this car. You realise very quickly that it is a BMW, and it rides and handles very much like every other BMW, so it's a lovely car to sort of sit in. The driving position is perfect and just as good as it is in any M car, for instance. You know, M Performance seats are just brilliant, or M Sport seats rather, and just the interior, etc. But what I enjoy doing in this car, and this might help the fact that I do have a 370 brake horsepower M135 parked at home in my garage, and I use that one to sort of go out and have a proper blasting, whereas I get in this car and I always play the MPG game. Now, I don't know if that's just my age or if that's pretty sad, but I do enjoy playing that, whereby each journey I set off and I try and achieve a plus 50 MPG figure on, you know, throughout the whole journey, and I really enjoy doing that. Now, in order to do that best in this car, you do put it in Eco Pro, and the main reason for putting it in Eco Pro is it has a very clever lift and coast function, which only works when you're in Eco Pro and you're in fully automatic. Now, what happens with that is when you're going sort of above 25 miles an hour, so I'm sitting currently about 30 now, if I come off the accelerator, once we get onto a bit of a down slope or a flat section, because you really only benefit from it there. So we're coming up to a brow of a hill now, so if I time this right, I'll come off the accelerator now and it goes into neutral basically. So now I'm rolling along and I'm keeping flow with the traffic in front in neutral, so I'm using literally no fuel, it's just ticking over at that point. So it's a very handy function to have, especially if you're on a flowy sort of road, because you always get what's called engine braking or some kind of resistance there, even in a gearbox like the 8-speed ZF where you're in 8th and it's very little resistance, but you do get some when you come off the accelerator. The engine braking does slow the car down gradually, but when you've got the lift and coast, that basically disengages any gears and gives you... I'll accelerate up to these cars now, look, come off the thing, and I'm actually going to go into the back of them, so I have to brake. So at first it takes a bit of getting used to, because it literally feels like the car is accelerating when you come off the throttle. It's not, it's just not losing much speed at all compared to if you had it in gear. So that's a very clever piece of engineering and technology that is very addictive and makes me drive and play this MPG game, which I guess is very good for the environment and offsets the Joe being an idiot in his other cars game. So yeah, so handling wise, I think it handles really well. And what I'd read before about the SE suspension on the pre-LCI and the fact that it rolled at, like, beyond, it just rolled way too much, etc. I haven't really found that in this car. It definitely feels like it's a little bit higher than a standard 3 Series, and there is a little bit more roll, which you would expect, but to me it handles as well as I could ever expect. It feels good. The ride on it's pretty good. It's, you know, typically a bit choppy because of the 19-inch wheels and the run flat tires and the M Sport suspension setup. So in that respect, yeah, you don't expect it to give you a better ride because it sits higher. Now, the spec in these cars, they're all identical, the cars that Tony's got for sale. So they're all mineral grey 320D M Sport xDrives. They've got black leather. They're reasonably optioned. They've got things like HK sound. They've got the ZF 8-speed sports automatic gearbox. So you've got the paddles and the lovely M Sport steering wheel. We have got things like heated seats in here, LED adaptive lights, I believe. Yep. So yeah, there's a few more bits. I'll list them below, but there's a few things that are missing out this car, but you've got to kind of cap it. You know, this as a retail product would be over £39,000. So we're talking close to 40 grand for a 320D. So yes, you can add more things to these cars, but there's got to be a line, and no matter how you spec your car, people are always going to go, oh, but you haven't got this, or oh, you haven't got that. Now, this has got the standard nav in the car, the business nav I think it's called. Now that's standard now across the range on all BMWs, so this has got that. And you know what, it's, from what I can tell, it's, you know, it's very effective. It works really well. Where I am now, outside in the countryside, sort of near Oxfordshire, it's a great nav and it almost does a job as good as the Pro Nav. Now, where that falls short is it doesn't have things like live traffic on there. It has a smaller screen, so you can't really split use it with other screens on there as easy. You can't read things quite as easy. there's a few functions that are missing that you kind of get used to with the Pro Nav, like voice control or voice commands, etc., that it doesn't have. So it is losing out, and you know, don't expect it to be as good as the Pro Nav, but of course that's going to be the case when you're paying nearly £1,000 extra for Pro Nav. So it doesn't have that. The other option that this car doesn't have, which I did initially think was odd, and a lot of people had commented about in my first initial pickup video, is it has the older dash, i.e. yes, it's non-digital and analog, which I personally love. I love, especially now that everything's going digital, I think analog dashboards are really nice. And I think some of the latest digital dashes, like in the 1 and 2 series, they're not fully digital, and they're just kind of, they're not a half-assed attempt, because that makes it sound mean or horrible, but they're just not as nice as, say, something you find in a G35 series, which you'd kind of expect, I guess. But yeah, I think, you know, I'd prefer to have a nice clear analog display than a kind of half digital or an LED backlit display. Now, the reason this one was getting comments and stuff on is because this doesn't have the, what they used to call, I think they still call it, the black panel display, which is the sort of, the bottom of the dash was all sort of digital, if you like, and that gave you a lot of readings on there, and it was just, it looked quite cool. It was really nice, whereas this one, it all kind of blended in as one, and you couldn't tell it was digital until you saw things on it, whereas this one is very analog, and then there's like a small digital display in the bottom. It's very old school, if you like. The Pro Nav, of course I miss not having the Pro Nav, but at the end of the day, if you know, if I wanted to be on budget and buy this car, or have this car as a sub 350 a month car with £1,000 down, that's the way I'm going to get around it, by, you know, taking £1,000 worth of navigation out of the car, because otherwise the interior and the quality and everything, it's a very nice place to be and a very nice place to sit in here. And having the HK sound is really nice. Now, I don't have that in any of my cars, and I do love that. I find myself listening to the stereo a lot more, radio, listening to my Spotify, which is a good thing in a car like this, because you certainly don't sit here listening to the engine where you would do in your 440i or, you know, any of your 6-pots. So that's quite a sensible option for 320 diesel. Get very good sound system, because then you can drown out the very ordinary engine note with some decent tunes. Cool, so I think that's it really. I'm going to wrap this video up, but basically, verdict of this car is it does a very good job at just being a car. You know, it will take you anywhere, it will do anything. It's cheap to run, it looks really good. I can't fault this car, you know, it does skid if you want it to skid. It's just a really nice, comfortable place to be in. In the 2 months that I've had it, I really look forward to using it each time. Every time I got in it, it was a joy and a pleasure to use, and watching that petrol gauge barely move, you know, week in, week out, is always a bonus. So yeah, I can't fault this car. They're brilliant cars, and I'm going to miss it, but I'm very thankful that I had the chance to run it as a sort of a long-termer, and you know, got to see what it was like to live with. Any questions, please leave them below. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video, and please subscribe. It's free to subscribe, and every time my subscriber count goes up, it just gives me a bit more clout in terms of getting my hands on other cars and reviewing stuff for you guys. So cool, I hope you're well. Thanks a lot for watching. Cheers.
Just got out, something's wrong. I waited up, the wounds on